Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Sean Huggins and this is Europe with Hugs. Thank you so much for being here. Today we are back with Hello Erica and her video entitled Explaining Europe to Americans. Oh, this should be interesting. Link to the original video down in the description as always. And of course, if you enjoy, consider subscribing. It's quick, easy, and free, and it'd be greatly appreciated. But let's hop straight into today's video. Let's see what's going on with this country everyone's calling Europe.
Europe, the land of weird European movies, the metric system, the relaxed laws of underage drinking, and the starter of both world wars. Lately I've been seeing a lot of information about Europe, and it's been a bit misguided. So here I present to you a little crash course about this part of the world. So let's start off with geography. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Europe does not look like this. It looks like this. Europe has
Wait a minute, let's go back to this. We got Ireland, UK, Spain, France, Italy, Germany, soon to be Russia, and that's it. Oh, okay.
Europe
soon to be Russia like hits a little bit different nowadays.
Like Europe has over 40 countries, so it's much more than just France, Germany, and Italy. And saying you visited Europe is a very broad term, because this part of Europe is very different from this part of Europe. The biggest country in Europe is Russia, and the smallest country in Europe is the Vatican City, which is basically a giant building with a giant park.
That doesn't count.
Europe can be divided depending on how you look at it. It can be divided politically, geographically, or historically. For example, here, the east from the west, and here, the red from the green from the turquoise, or potato tomato.
Tomato Europe, potato Europe. Oh my god. Potato tomato, dude. That is genius and so funny. Dude, I've never seen that before, and that is amazing. I am now going to be referring, if I'm back in Europe, I'm going to say, am I in East Europe? Am I in West Europe? Am I in a specific country? No. Nope. I'm either in Tomato Europe or Potato Europe from now on. That is great. I like that.
So let's look at the general way of how Europe can be divided. Firstly on the list is, of course, Western Europe. These are the countries that people want to move in, live in, and be born in. They are economically better off and they have a lot of work opportunities. These countries include Germany, France, Austria, Belgium, and if you don't count the British Islands as their separate thing, then they also are in the west of Europe. Next up we have Northern Europe. A lot of these countries are doing great, or even they're better off in terms of quality of life. Except for Sweden, it's having a rough patch with crimes, apparently. But they're pretty cold, and in the winter it gets really dark, so not a lot of people want to move there, necessarily. Not only are they cold when it comes to weather, but also when it comes to their friendliness scale. They're usually considered a bit more unfriendly or reserved. These countries are also referred to as Nordic or Scandinavian countries. They have a lot of Viking heritage and they like to fish. They have a lot of fish and water around them. Moving on to Southern Europe. These are the countries that people like to visit on vacation. They're warm, maybe too warm for some people, and by some people I mean me. They have great food and wine, they're pretty friendly, and some of them like to take naps in the middle of the day. Which sounds like a dream. But their economy is not doing that great. And if you're wondering why is this section a darker orange, well, I'll get to that in a bit. And now we have Eastern Europe. Well, the problem with Eastern Europe is that nobody wants to be called Eastern Europe. This division is based on the time when the Fire Nation attacked, so a lot of these countries were occupied. Since East of Europe is not the best area to be associated with, countries like to identify themselves with other names. For example, Romania, Croatia likes to be called the Balkans. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are the Baltics. But to be honest, they're quite high up geographically, so maybe they could be considered even Northern Europe. Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia likes to be called the Central Europe. And now we're left with countries that are not doing that great, for multiple reasons. And I would say maybe they would rather be called Slavic countries rather than Eastern Europe. You can be both, but one of them sounds a bit more cool than the other one. So if you agree with the concept of Central Europe, then scratch whatever I said before about Europe looking like this. Now Europe looks like this.
Oh,
and I have to say I have nothing
lovely.
against being called Central Europe or the existence of Central Europe. I think it's just funny how nobody wants to be called Eastern European. So then lastly, we have Central Europe. Basically all the German-speaking countries and more. These countries are located in the core economic region of Europe. They have stable governments and a relatively high quality of life. And these countries also love beer. And they like to fight on who drinks the most beer. This is an interesting correlation I found. Not that it's related to geography, but it's an interesting fact. With all that said, the number one thing you should remember is that Europe is not a country. It is a continent that has a lot of countries.
What? Since when? And who was going to tell me this information?
And if you know where the capital of Paris, Berlin, and London is, you're doing a good job, and you should pat yourself on the shoulder.
The capital of Paris, Berlin, and London? They have capitals? What?
Definitely don't expect you to know where Malta is, which is
Malta.
right here. And it's very
I know that
small.
because of
I don't even expect
CS:GO.
people from France to know the capital of Latvia. So if you know a little bit about this place, it's already pretty good. I think one of the most important things is just not to make assumptions. For example, calling Lithuania basically Russia is very disrespectful. Or Ireland is the same as UK.
Oh,
Not a good thing to
no-no.
do. So maybe open a map before opening your mouth. Just a friendly suggestion. And also maybe it's helpful to know the difference between Europe and European Union.
I definitely see the purpose of this. That is very useful information to have. But she did leave UK out of the European continent before, if I'm not mistaken, which seems like she may have mixed it up for European Union. Or am I looking too far into this? I don't know. I don't care enough. Let's continue.
Which I'll cover that in a bit. And now we can move on to history. Well, Europeans have a lot of beef with each other. UK and Ireland, Romania and Hungary, Portugal and Spain, and Russia with basically everybody in the world. And it's all because of history. Europe has a lot of it. There were a lot of agreements, disagreements, and wars over land in the past and also now. Some stuff is serious and some stuff ended up countries just making fun of each other. For example, Austria making fun of Germany, France and the Netherlands making fun of Belgium, or the whole Scandinavian area making fun of the Danes because of their weird sounding language. Because of history, we have cities like this that were weirdly divided.
Oh, I did a video on this city actually on this channel. You could check that out. I'll leave a link to that video down in the description. Very interesting video.
Between Netherlands and Belgium. They even have houses that are divided into two, so
Yeah, it's very cool.
pretty strange. And we
Strange,
also have a
but
city
cool.
like this in the Baltics, between Estonia and Latvia. Then when you compare Europe to the US, you can see that America is actually bigger in size than Europe. Much bigger.
Whoa. Is she confusing Europe, the continent, with Europe, the European Union? Oh my gosh. She broke her own rule. Since Russia is part of Europe, Europe is much bigger than America. Interesting.
Europe is 2/3
Interesting.
of America. But the main difference between these two is that one of them is much more densely populated than the other. The US has 300 million people living in there, and Europe has 700 million.
Russia not included because it's also in Asia. Well, now we have conflicting stories.
And yet they're smaller in size. Each country here has their own rules, their own languages, their own culture, and so a more accurate comparison would be something like this. Every country is their own little America. And what I mean by that, we can take a look at Germany, for example.
Europe is just
The
little
country
America?
is divided into 16 states.
Interesting.
And this Germany is very different. They also sound very different. When they talk to each other, they might not even understand each other. Plus, we also have Austria right here that also speaks German, but their German is very different from the standard German. But they are right next to each other, so how did this happen? History
Don't ask
and
me.
culture and a lot of the stuff in between. Then we can also look at UK, which is fully separated from Europe by water. Here the country is divided into 4 regions,
So they're
which
not
is
in Europe.
Scotland, Wales, England,
Interesting.
and Northern Ireland. But if you look deeper under the surface, it's also divided into smaller regions.
Oh,
And if you try harder, you can also divide it into just towns, cities, and villages. The UK is an interesting example of how
Okay.
the language and the culture developed a little bit differently, even though they're right next to each other and the country is quite small. Here, people can recognize your status or class based on where you grew up in, which is a thing, I suppose. Now, let's talk about the economical state
right.
of Europe. Firstly, let's cover what is the EU, or European Union, as they say. It is an
What is it?
international organization
different
comprising
country?
of 27 countries that govern common social, economic, and security policies. EU is in Europe, but the whole Europe is not in the EU. Just like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. What I mean is that
What?
not all European countries are a part of this. Some do want to join and some want to leave, for a variety of reasons. From my understanding, this is the EU flag, not the Europe flag, but we do use it as a Europe flag to represent the unity of Europe, which is a little bit confusing, but there's not much I can do. The nice
Confusing.
part about the EU is that a lot of European countries share the same currency, which is the euro currency. Not all of
Yes.
them use euros, but many do. These countries like to stick to their currencies. So if you try and buy some groceries with your American dollars, you will most likely be rejected. Unless you're in an airport or some kind of tourist
sense.
hotspot, then it will not go that well. I mean, would you sell me a sandwich if I say I have 200,000 Animal Crossing bells? Probably not.
I would,
And if
yes.
you said yes,
I need
I'm
more
not
bells.
sure about your business practices. 20 EU
Okay,
countries
never
use
mind.
euros, but in total it's 27 because some countries decided to make it their currency unofficially. But not all EU countries switched to euro, and some of them still stayed with their old currency. So if you're traveling to those countries, check ahead what kind of money do they use. And ignore UK because I forgot they decided to leave or they already left. So they're just doing their own thing.
Oh my gosh. She has the UK in the European Union. She broke her own rule again. Doesn't know the difference between the Europe and the EU.
But many countries over the years did switch to using euros, which is very convenient when you travel. But as a Latvian, I remember having lats and being very sad that we're going to switch to euros now.
That's a cool
The only
coin.
reason I didn't want it to happen because I really like this coin. And,
too.
you know, nostalgia reasons and cultural reasons. But now I don't have to exchange my currency or try and always calculate in my mind how much is this in lats or how much is this in euros.
Yeah.
So, overall, a good thing, I think. You can let me know if you have an opinion about this. Now, the last thing on our list is culture. America is not Europe.
America is not Europe. That's true. She said Europe is tiny Americas. We're getting somewhere now. We're getting to the bottom of this.
And Europe is not America. We
Oh,
run things differently around here. Like, for example, it's very rare to find a building that has central AC. Most of us just have a
Stores.
big heat wave in the middle of the summer and we suffer for 2 weeks and then it's all good.
Stores and
But the
restaurants,
normal
maybe.
AC is a bit more common in Southern Europe, but not everywhere. In some ways, we're not that different from you. And maybe we're not even better than you, but we certainly think we are. I mean, we also have
True.
McDonald's, and we do like our convenient cars, but we're not that obsessed with it. And our cities don't look like the medieval times. I mean, some do, but we certainly
sometimes.
stopped throwing trash out of the windows and burning witches. As mentioned before,
Yeah.
Europe has a lot of countries, so there's a lot of different cultures, foods, traditions, and preferences. And so I gathered some cultural things to generally know about Europe. The first thing on my list is that you're probably not Italian. If the
Oh,
only
yeah.
thing that
Oh, dude, this is true. Most Americans, when you ask what they are, even if they are born and raised in America, they will say where their ancestors are from. And usually it's from a bunch of different places. Like for me, my ancestors are from like Britain and Scotland and Wales and even like Germany and I think Greece and Republic of Ireland and Lithuania. Like there's there's so much stuff in there. And that's the same thing with a lot of Americans, most Americans that have been in America for a few generations. That's how they are. And when you ask an American, where are you from? They'll really say where their grandparents are from, or great-grandparents, or great-great-grandparents, or whatever. And so they'll be like, oh, I'm Italian. When in reality, they're like 30% Italian and then 70%, 20 different other things. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's just like a weird American thing that we do. I don't know why we do that.
What makes you Italian is that you took an ancestry test that told you that your blood is 57% Italian. You're probably not Italian. It doesn't count if you have Italian ancestors from the 1800s that settled to America. If you didn't grow up in Italy, you don't have any Italian relatives like grandparents, parents, or aunts and uncles, and you don't know how to speak Italian. I'm sorry to say this, but you're not Italian.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. I don't know why people do that in America. I don't think people are trying to say I'm Italian, like I'm from Italy, Italian citizen, but that's just a weird grammatical way of Americans saying my ancestors are from Italy, but it's still stupid. I agree.
Being able to pronounce mozzarella correctly or having a family recipe of spaghetti and meatballs doesn't give you an Italian passport. Plus, spaghetti and meatballs is an Italian-American dish. They don't really eat that in Italy. Don't get me wrong, it's a nice fact and it's fun to know where your ancestors came from, but it doesn't mean that you have the right to claim to be this nationality. Then, a lot of people here are bilingual, but that does not mean that they know English. Oftentimes in most schools you learn three languages. Your language, the neighboring country's language, and most likely English or whatever else you want to learn. But that does not mean everybody speaks English or want to speak English. So it's always nice to learn a little bit before you come here. Even just knowing how to say please and thank you is already something. Then thirdly, in Eastern Europe and in Northern Europe, people don't really like small talking with strangers. Plus, walking and smiling alone is considered weird. They probably will think you're crazy. People here are reserved and cold because it probably is cold most of the time, and they don't like to waste their energy on things that don't really matter. So if you see them smiling, it's most likely sincere. Then next we have Sundays. Some countries consider Sunday as a holy day, so a lot of shops and grocery stores are closed. Or they might not be open at their usual schedule. Germany and Poland are quite serious about it, so you'll just have to deal with it. Food is also a big part of our culture, so here is a subsection about food and restaurants.
Oh boy, my favorite topic. Yummy.
Well, first of all, let's talk about additives. The EU is cautious of what we put in our food.
I've watched a bunch of videos, maybe not a bunch, but a couple of videos on this on the channel, and it's very eye-opening.
As you can see, the fries from McDonald's, here is a list of ingredients in the UK, which I think by that time was part of the EU. And here is a list of ingredients that they use in the US. Way more things that I don't know what they are. Don't get me wrong, we have many ingredients that start with the letter E and end with a number, but we are very selective of which ones we want to bring into our club. What I've learned from food theory is that EU takes the approach of guilty until proven innocent. Meaning if the additives are proven to not be harmful, then they're accepted into our food chain. Each country has their own specialties and traditional foods, so there's lots to experience and to try. So we'll probably find it a little bit weird if you stick to McDonald's and Starbucks and Dunkin' that you can find back at home a 10-minute drive away from your house. But I do have to say, if you're going to these places to find something new, something that is not sold in your country, then I think it's fine. I've done it. For some reason people are judging me for this, but...
Dude, it is a little bit interesting. Not the most interesting thing to do in a foreign country, but it's mildly interesting to go to like McDonald's and see like different menu items that they only have in that country. It's a little interesting.
I want to know what a macaron tastes like at a French McDonald's. I'm curious, is it good? Is it bad? Should I buy it again? Speaking of restaurants, prepare yourself that the service will be just okay. They will not go above and beyond to please your every need. They might not be fast and they might not be friendly. They are humans that have emotions and down days and are not full of energy all the time. And they will leave you alone to eat your food and might not check up on you at all. I've been to plenty of cafes and restaurants where they did have very friendly and good service, but not all of them will be like this. And so Just be mentally prepared that they will not take your dish back and give you a refund if you just don't like it. You'll just have to pick something better next time. Then also we have tipping. In most countries, waiters receive a fair minimum wage. But it's still minimum wage, so it's quite low. So we do like tipping, but just 5 to 10%. A more modest tip.
5 to 10%. That's even, I think, more than I was expecting. Interesting.
Or you just round off the bill that the number looks nice. But the tipping etiquette can be different for each country. For example, in Germany, you tip when you pay. But in France, you leave a tip on the table when you leave and already paid. What I hear a lot of people from America living or visiting Europe say that we don't have good Mexican food. And
ooh, okay. I've never heard this before, but when I was living in Germany, it was hard to find Mexican food in the area that I was living. And the one place, there was one restaurant that I went to, it was not great. Not gonna lie, it was not great, but I mean, that's fine. I don't expect amazing Mexican food all over the world. It's fine. I don't care. I don't blame anyone for it.
It's true, because Mexico is right here, right next to the United States.
Yeah.
And Mexico is pretty far away from Europe. So not a lot of people that know how to cook good Mexican food come to Europe to open Mexican restaurants. And that makes sense because we have a whole ocean between us. Don't get me wrong, I would love to go to a Mexican restaurant, but I don't even know how good Mexican food tastes like because I've never been to Mexico.
This is a good point. This is true. There might be a bunch of Mexican restaurants in Europe that are kind of mediocre, but people don't even know because they don't even know what the good Mexican stuff tastes like. I don't know. Like I said, when I was living in Germany, it was just hard to even find Mexican restaurants. So I just never ate Mexican food, so I don't know.
Because again, it's pretty far away. So maybe you should implement geography classes into your school education. Just saying. When visiting restaurants, cafes, and other public places, it is important for us to be spatially aware and not be too loud. Americans have a reputation here in Europe that they're loud and annoying. Maybe they're not necessarily American, they might be Canadian, but just be aware of the situation, if it's quiet or not, and how loud you're speaking. Especially in countries like Germany, they take it really seriously and they will point it out that you're being too loud. Now, all that being said, Europe is not a perfect place. We have a lot of issues of our own. Europe is considered to be pretty safe from the rest of the world, but we still have crimes here. And as I said before, Sweden, I'm looking at you. What's happening? Especially in big cities, we have a lot of scams and pickpocketers, and Paris would be the first city that comes to mind that has this issue. Then Europe also has racial discrimination, some countries more than others. But an interesting statement that I've heard is that we dislike or have prejudices against people from other countries rather than skin color.
Oh, interesting. I'm curious what she's going to say here. I have experience with this. Living in Germany, I have some stories. I have some stories.
Which I think the description also fits. Okay. So we also do have our problems.
I agree.
So here are some of my final thoughts. Well, if you're an American living in America, you probably don't really care about the intricacies of being European and living in Europe, and that's okay. We don't know everything about you, and I don't think you should know everything about us. We have our own stuff to deal with, but I do think we can learn from each other. For example, having free public bathrooms or universal healthcare. If you're planning on visiting European countries, I would suggest just looking up some stuff about what to do or what not to do, and some little language bits and pieces of saying please and thank you. Or just in general, be more aware of your surroundings. Not just for Americans, but for anyone out there in the world.
All right, dude. Very informative video. Yeah, I think this was very good and very well made. I agree with most of the stuff she was saying, almost everything. Very good, very well made. And like I said, link to the original video down in the description. Definitely check it out. And again, if you enjoyed, consider subscribing. It helps the algorithm, which helps the channel, and it'd be greatly appreciated. But that's all the time that I have for today. So thank you guys so much for being here. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.